Hello, welcome to Echo Africa. I am Chris Alems in Ogun State, Nigeria. Resources on our planet are becoming scarcer. Habitat for wild animals is disappearing and access to water becoming more difficult. But there are promising solutions. Joining me for this show will be Sandra.
It is very true, Chris, that sometimes we can achieve a lot with very, very little. I am Sandra Twinobidio here in Kampala, Uganda, and here are some of our topics today. An initiative in a poor Nairobi neighborhood that is connecting people to clean and cheap water. How scientists in France use invasive plants as eco-catalysts. And how a primary school teacher is fighting coastal erosion in Senegal. According to a UN report, humans share over half of the global land area with other animals. Especially in the poorer regions of the world, people and animals are at odds when it comes to vital resources such as food, water, and habitat. For many lions, polar bears, seals, and elephants, the struggle to secure their basic needs ends up costing them their lives. Now, these human-wildlife conflicts endanger the preservation of species. In Gabon, attempts are now being made to find a fair resolution for both sides.
In the dense cover of the rainforest, they are difficult to find, but you might spot their traces in the mud on branches, sometimes tusk marks on a tree trunk. Then suddenly, they're in front of you, a group of forest elephants in Pongara National Park in Gabon, Central Africa. The rainforest is their home. Protected national parks cover 10% of the country, but hungry elephants are venturing beyond their boundaries and plundering nearby fields.
That causes problems because villages feed themselves from those plantations. And when the elephants eat all this, something I have been for months, and that will give me food for my children and all this, the elephants in one day, only one day, it destroys it. Something that could last for me and my parents maybe 1 year, it's just vanish in one day. You see how people get mad and sometimes kill the elephants.
People here are venting their anger in other ways too. Farmers recently staged protests. As well as having less to eat, they're worried about rising food prices. The government has responded by providing $4.5 million to farmers whose fields have been destroyed by elephants. Authorities are also erecting electric fences to scare elephants away from the fields.
Some people cannot farm anymore. The elephants are eating so much of their crops. And so if we cannot provide protection to those people in the form of electric fences, we have the technology. It's just a matter now of money to build the electric fences to protect people's crops.
More than 50 electric fences have been installed. Some of them are solar powered.
As soon as I connect it, you should hear a sound. That means it's on.
These fences are being seen as an important first step.
It seems like they seem to be working. Of course, it's early days because elephants are smart, and what might keep them out of a fence now as they get shot, they can eventually learn to get around if they really want to. So I think that there's a great promise, but at the same time, it needs to be followed over time, and we need to be careful about that.
The government is also planning to gather data on the routes the elephants are taking so they can better anticipate potential conflicts. Around 95,000 forest elephants live in Gabon. The species is critically endangered. The Environment Ministry says around 50 elephants are killed every year in acts of self-defense or revenge, while 10 people have been killed by elephants in the past 2.5 years. It's hoped the electric fences will help ease this conflict, but as long as more and more habitat is being cleared for farming, it will be tough to find workable long-term solutions.
Habitats are vital for animal survival. In Europe, there are many instances where the habitat essential for amphibians and reptiles is being lost. But today we have somewhat of a heartwarming story about two people who care deeply about protecting species in their region.
That's right, Sandra. While in recent years the UK has increased its amount of protected areas, this hasn't been able to provide any help to a lot of smaller animals. But initiatives like this one in England, run by Harvey Tweets and Tom Whitehurst, could help.
The non-venomous Aesculapian snake, the moor frog, and the European pond turtle. 3 species that are nearly extinct in Great Britain. 18-year-old Harvey Tweets wants to change that. On a strip of previously derelict land in Staffordshire near Manchester, he breeds endangered reptiles and amphibians.
Basically, we've got these large outdoor vivariums, and they are open-aired enclosures in which the habitat of the animal which lives in them is recreated so they feel right at home. We've got the moor frog in here, we've got sand lizards and natterjack toads here. We've got about 20 species and about 200 individuals within those species, so it's one of the largest collections you're going to find in Europe.
In 2020, Harvey Tweets and Tom Whitehurst leased land and began constructing the facility. Their aim is to conserve, breed, and ultimately reintroduce creatures that were once familiar sights in Britain's countryside. They obtained their first reptiles from private breeders, and breeding remains one of the biggest challenges they face.
There's nothing more rewarding. I mean, it's amazing to see when, when that snake hatches, the egg first sort of cracks and you see the head come out, it's amazing, that you've sort of, you've spent all year in build-up to, seeing that moment. So it's really, it makes you feel more human, it makes you feel alive.
The two 18-year-olds regularly post their progress on YouTube.
So join us on our journey.
With over 2,000 subscribers, this project is part of the growing rewilding movement, the goal of which is to restore the natural habitats of plants and animals.
There's practical knowledge, there's academic knowledge, and then there's just know-how. And I think that, with this sort of thing, passion drives what you know, and if you have a passion, you are willing to learn, you read, you talk to people, you network, and it's those things which allow you to become, good at what you do.
One animal that clearly shows just how urgently action is needed is the slow worm. This used to be widespread throughout central England.
In the local area around here, they've gone extinct, regionally extinct, due to the fact that, the type of agriculture we have here doesn't provide enough habitat, for them. And especially when there's deep ploughing, so when, the soil gets ploughed so seeds can be planted, that just kills them.
Harvey Tweets is always on the lookout for suitable locations to rewild slow worms. And from a distance, this green landscape looks like a perfect habitat for his reptiles. But upon closer inspection, he notices signs of farming activity, which in its modern form has harmed biodiversity.
It would be completely unethical to release these species into habitats which are not suitable. And that's especially why we're picking areas which are being actively rewilded, because the habitat is only going to get bigger and better.
The rewilding location Gunmore near the small town of Leek will provide such a habitat. Environmental activists ran a crowdfunding campaign to purchase the area, about the size of 110 soccer fields. They currently have 5 rewilding projects being assessed for approval. The 2 teenagers will hopefully be able to begin reintroducing animals soon. But it will take years to see whether the restoration is successful and the species are back in the wild.
We've often reported on Echo Africa about the damage done by invasive plants such as water hyacinth. In France, Japanese knotweed is also infamous for displacing native plant species. Scientists at the University of Montpellier have now discovered a surprising feature of the invader in this week's Doing Your Bits.
Every cut helps to heal. Japanese knotweed has spread all along the Hérault River in southern France. The invasive species has displaced many native plants here, and its shallow roots are putting the riverbanks at risk of erosion. Researchers at Montpellier University are clearing the knotweed. They've discovered it has surprising properties. Crushed, dried, and ground into powder, it can dramatically speed up chemical processes.
It's either the roots or the leaves, which are rich in minerals, metallic minerals of interest. They'll be thermally treated to obtain this vegetable powder. The vegetable powder is already itself an eco-catalyst, that is to say, a reaction booster which will allow us to transform a simple molecule into a more complex molecule.
The researchers say this so-called eco-catalyst could make the manufacture of products like face creams more environmentally friendly.
The field of cosmetics today still uses mineral or petrochemical catalysts. This idea of plant-based catalysts has never been developed before.
The researchers have already developed at least 60 plant-based catalysts. They're now being marketed by a startup at the University of Montpellier.
And how about you? If you're also doing your bit, tell us about it. Visit our website or send us a tweet. #DoingYourBit. We share your stories.
Back to Africa now. The ongoing climate crisis is forcing us to be more frugal with our most important resources. You guessed it, water. In Lagos, less than 40% of people have access to clean drinking water. The situation is similar in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, where the poorest residents live in terrible conditions. Now, a private sector initiative is introducing innovative technical solutions to help them.
Just one touch of the sensor and clean water flows from the machine. It's changed Berelikinji's life.
The water we get is clean, affordable and easily accessible.
Berelikinji has lived all her life in Matare, one of the biggest slums in Nairobi. Those 22 years have been governed by a daily struggle for clean water. She had to walk long distances to a water point, in constant fear of being attacked or getting sick from the water.
The dirty water gives people diarrhea. They drink it untreated because they have no other option.
500,000 people live in Matare in very close quarters. Settlements like this one keep growing, and so does the need for water.
The cities are exploding, we are unplanned, you have more and more people coming from the countryside, settling down in the cities, in slums that are not on the map of water providers, so they are not getting water.
Anne Bousquet from UN Habitat sees another problem.
There is a backlog of infrastructure development over the years. The water companies, the government have not invested enough to maintain the pipes. So we have very old water networks that are leaking.
And on top of that, cartels often control the taps. They may charge extortionate prices or sexually exploit young women for water. Berelikinji feels safe now that she can get her water from the machine. It's charged at a fixed rate and she doesn't need to carry cash.
If I have 10 Kenyan shillings on my chip, that lasts me up to 3 days. Before, I could only get 3 jerry cans of water for that money.
The users receive about 10 times as much water for their money now. Kenneth Wendo from the supplier Maji Malele had his work cut out trying to convince water companies and authorities to back the idea.
When we started this technology was not very popular. So I think one of the biggest impact is to get organizations, entities to think about technology. We are introducing technology which is being taken up very quickly. One of the things we see now is with adoption of the prepaid water ATM, service delivery is becoming more efficient.
Low operating costs were one of Wendo's main arguments. Staff are only required for maintenance. And this has actually helped to diffuse conflicts in some places.
There are areas where tribal conflicts are affecting how people consume water. So if you are, let's say, from tribe A, you cannot fetch water from tribe B because the kiosk attendant prevents you from fetching that water. Now this doesn't happen. People are served indiscriminately.
The technology comes from Enschede in the Netherlands. Anton Lepelaar was working in Africa for an aid project when he came up with an idea to better regulate the water supply.
Once the user presents his token, the valve will open and the flow meter will measure the amount of water. There's a GSM modem inside, an SD card to store all the transactions.
The machines send data on consumption to the cloud. This allows supply and demand to be regulated.
You see all the systems in Matare, and then here you can see the revenue for one water point.
There are already around 800 of these pay-as-you-go water dispensers in Kenya and some neighbouring countries. Fortunately, there's been very little vandalism so far. Berila Kinji comes here several times a day. She says that with this new clean water supply, stomach upsets are a thing of the past.
Now let's head from the crowded cities to the countrysides. But if you assume there will be cleaner water and more of it away from the cities, you'd be mistaken.
Absolutely right, Chris. In southern African countries in particular, the water situation has worsened considerably due to increasing periods of drought. In Zimbabwe, people are trying to conserve and stockpile what little water there is.
In the morning, Sheba Ngara steps out of her house to fetch water from the tank in her yard. She's only had the cistern for 5 years. It's a lifesaver for the single mother who, like other farmers in Zimbabwe, faces increasing challenges because of climate change. Sheba Ngara grows everything she needs to sustain her family on a small plot of land.
The fields haven't produced much these past seasons. We either get too little or too much rain. The sense of uncertainty has made it hard for the children to concentrate on their schoolwork. Before I had this water harvester, when the rains came, the water would just run off in waste. We had no idea what to do with it. Sometimes we collected a little in small tins and buckets.
But that didn't help during dry spells. For years, Zimbabwe's droughts have increased in frequency and duration. The consequences are dramatic. Its famous Victoria Falls were reduced to a relative trickle in 2019, making international headlines. This year hasn't seen enough rain either. The corn in the fields isn't growing properly. Harvest yields are shrinking year by year. The UN says almost half of Zimbabwe's population of some 15 million is now dependent on food aid. People with no access to a well have to get their water from rivers that are also drying up. The aid agency CARE has helped solve the water shortage in Sheba Ngara's village in the country's southeast. It's supplied 50 families with water tanks, and together, the community has built a dam that holds 45,000 cubic meters of water. The water flows along the terrain's natural slopes to irrigate the fields, eliminating the need for a climate-damaging diesel pump.
As long as we have several options to store rainwater efficiently, we stand a chance of survival, even through the dry season. We can afford to grow food for our families, whether there is rain or not, during any given year.
The farmers have another pressing problem that still needs to be solved. The water from the reservoir isn't safe to drink. There are already a few ideas. CARE has drilled 12 wells in the region. Some are equipped with solar pumps. That saves money and protects the climate. Every well should be able to supply 500 people along with their gardens. There's a designated repair team to make sure everything stays in good working order. That creates jobs, including for women like Precocious Mukati, who is a mechanic.
A borehole can't be inoperable for more than a day to ensure the availability of clean water. If it's out of service for several days and left unattended, it can become a target of vandalism, and some individuals might end up messing around with the parts.
But in many areas of Zimbabwe, even the groundwater is being depleted by drought. That's why, regardless of where the water comes from, priority should be given to conserving it.
A water shortage in Zimbabwe, but too much water in Senegal. In our next story, it's not about drinking water, but about the salt water in our seas. The Atlantic Ocean is eroding the coasts of West Africa, an unstoppable phenomenon. Now, residents of Diong in southern Senegal have reversed the trend, and we want to take a look.
Trees no longer grow here, and nobody can live here anymore. On the island of Diogué in southern Senegal, the Atlantic waves are eating away at the shoreline. It's happening on the whole West African coast. The reason? Rising sea levels, a consequence of human-induced global warming. Gilbert Bassin is an elementary school teacher in Diogué. He says in the 6 years that he's lived here, the situation has become much worse.
The sea levels have been rising, taking over the beach. When I arrived here in 2016, just here, you could see coconut trees all along the beach. We even had houses just here. They were about 20 meters from the sea, but now the sea is advancing.
Now Gilbert Bassin is fighting against the destructive force of the waves. Joining him in the fight is Patrick Chevalier, a retired business professor. He's brought a new idea to Diogué, which is giving the people fresh hope. Structures made of wooden posts and palm fronds hold the sand in place and bring back the beaches. Curious children gathered to watch the work. This red string shows Bassin and Chevalier how much sand has accumulated.
The stick came up here before, where the string is. 1 week later, we can see that 25 centimeters of sand has accumulated.
These semi-permeable barriers are arranged in right angles on the beach. As the sea carries in sand, the side arms catch it. Unlike less permeable defenses made of stone or concrete, they also don't drastically change the currents along the shore, which could cause erosion elsewhere. They've proven effective.
On a stretch of beach measuring 1.5 kilometers, which we call the fishing dock, we'll likely gain at least 30 meters on the entire stretch. These are the results we saw in the 2 previous places we worked on, so we think it will have the same effect here.
But despite the proven success of the method, some locals are skeptical that what the sea has destroyed over years could ever be restored.
It's not easy to admit, but one day the village will have to move. It's not easy to leave the place where you were born and set up a different place. It's not easy. But one day it's going to happen. Maybe I'll be there to witness it, or not. But one of my sons will witness it.
However, Gilbert Bassin is certain that the erosion of Diogué's shoreline can be reversed, and that it can be done without waiting for help from the state.
I thought we'd need a lot of resources to slow down rising sea levels, but with the little that we have, we can achieve extraordinary work. Because with this, we can gain up to 100 meters of sand.
But despite these successes, many West African countries are seeing increased coastal erosion, and better coastal management is needed on a regional level.
Well, we've come to the end of this week's program. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to be careful with our natural resources because we don't have an unlimited amount of them. For now, it is a goodbye from Kampala here in Uganda.
And it's also time for me to sign off from Nigeria. Please do share your thoughts and ideas with us on our social media platforms. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, bye. And do take care of yourself.